I first started in 1971, late 1971, after touring the US with the band. It was Rod Stewart and the Faces, Deep Purple and Matthew's Southern Comfort, and I was with Matthew's Southern Comfort. And after the tour I was asked to join Deep Purple and I jumped at the chance. So that was it, basically. I was along since then until quite recently. Well, we'll skip that part. It was certainly the best time for touring, in my opinion, from a performer's and personnel point of view. It was great for the crew. Certainly the best times to actually tour. Now it seems like it's all business and politics, and it's all about money now. So the whole atmosphere has changed. Not really, because that was like the best time to tour for most bands. It was a really exciting time. Every band in the world seemed to be out on the road, and it just seemed right. It was wonderful. It was a great time to tour. I was asked by Blackmore to come along, and it seemed like the end of Deep Purple to me. It was a sad time. So I decided to make the jump and move with them. And Purple carried on with Tommy Bolin and David Coverdale and Glenn Hughes. And I made the move. So it was nothing I regretted, that's for sure. Right from the very start, yeah. We all moved to California with Richie, and that's where we set up shop and started looking for musicians. He originally took all of a band called Elf to California with him, and then slowly started to replace them one at a time. And Ronnie Dio was the singer in the band at the time. So we ended up keeping Ronnie and replacing everyone else one at a time over a slow and long and tedious sort of process. And finding new musicians was the worst part of that time. I had the unenviable job of removing the musicians one at a time that he didn't like. So some of them never got to even perform. They just were replaced before. He'd be playing pool and he'd see someone pull in and say, "Oh, get rid of him, would you?" "Well, don't you want to hear him?" "No, just get rid of him." And that was pretty much how we went along on a daily basis for months till he found the right combination. There was a little bit from some members towards Richie. I think they were envious of him going off on his own and sort of leaving them high and dry, as it were. But they both had their individual levels of success. Deep Purple did carry on for a while and quite successful with Tommy, and Richie made the right decision at that time, I think. He jumped when it was right. Very interesting. There was a change of musicians almost weekly, so it was quite exciting. But it was one of the best times of my life, I think. The early Rainbow years, living in California and living at the beach. Couldn't be better, really. Perfect. But it was hard work, wading through millions of musicians. But quite exciting. Mr. Blackmore being arrested, yes. Looking back, what he did was fair. I mean, there was a guy in front of the stage who was beating up a 12-year-old girl, or what looked like a 12-year-old girl, who was trying to get closer to the band, and he was just punching her. So Richie, seeing this, it was the first time he'd reacted like this ever, as far as I'd seen. He went up and he kicked the guy in the side of the head to just get his attention, And it just happened to be the hall manager, who was friends with every policeman in the whole of Austria, so it seemed. So by the time the show was over, the entire backstage area was swarming with police. And we made a valiant attempt to smuggle him out of the building, the road crew came up with this great idea. They'd shove him in a flight case, close it up and roll it into a truck and then try and get him out, as quickly as possible. And of course the police dogs put an end to that. They sort of sniffed him out, which wasn't hard at that time, having just done a 90-minute show. And he was tumbled. And one of our road crew, a guy called Ox, took quite a beating to actually prevent Richie from taking a beating. So it was quite an ugly scene, but Richie was hauled off to jail, so was this guy Ox, and we got Ox out that night, but they held on to Richie, being the more valuable of the two. And he was there for 3 days before we got him out. We carried on, went on to Germany, and we had lawyers working from both sides of the Atlantic to get him out. And eventually we got him out, and we got him to Munich within minutes of being too late to do a performance. Somebody drove him from Austria to there in the same clothes he was wearing the night of the Austrian show. Drove him straight into the arena that we were playing in, the Munich Olympiahalle actually. And he took about 10 minutes to compose himself and went right back on stage with exactly the same stage clothes on. And I think the entire thing was videoed, so I mean, it's you can see there was some sort of strain and relief in his eyes and in his playing that night. We went on stage about 12 o'clock at night. The crowd waited, and they knew what was going on. They knew why I was late, and it turned out to be a great show, actually. Definitely Arby. He controlled the whole ship at the time. It was exactly what he wanted, how he wanted it, and he knew what he wanted. He knew exactly what he wanted to hear from the musicians, and that's why he was so fussy and trying to get the exact lineup he wanted. He knew exactly what he wanted to hear, and he wouldn't stop until he heard that, and he got it. A wonderful guy and a great loss to the music industry. I had the pleasure to share a house with him for a couple of years in Connecticut, and really, really nice guy. All the nice ones go first, so it seems. Ronnie was also a great guy. I mean, I hate to sound so. But Ronnie was excellent, or is an excellent guy. Nice, great man to know. We had an excellent time on the road with this orchestral tour. He was just a charm to work with. He actually did every interview I asked him to do without question. So it was great to work with him again. And he's a lovely guy, real lovely guy. Actually, Bob Daisley just called me from Australia out of the blue for the first time. It's the first time I've spoken to him in about 12 years. And we had a very, very long chat for an hour and a half about life, love, hate, relationships, the old days. Really, really good chat. It was great to talk to him again. We talked about the old times and the good times and the future. And he's doing well. He's married with 2 kids and still married to the same lady for all these 20 odd years now, so he's doing well. But he moved back to Australia and he loves it there. So. I love Joe. What can you say? He's a lovely guy. Harmless, good voice. You gotta love him. Excellent voice, a little bit of a character. He was quite easy for me to work with, but he was tough for some of the other guys to get along with. Richie had a hair issue with him for some reason. He hated this sort of short-haired look that he had and tried in vain to have him grow his hair many times, but unsuccessfully. Graham would cut it just to annoy him, I think, and it never had any effect on any of the public or the way he could sing. That's the way he liked to look, so he did. And Richie eventually, I think, drove him out because of that, just because of the haircut. Well, I've kind of already answered that. It was Richie looking and knowing what he wanted, looking for a certain sound, and he knew it was there, and he just had to keep turning over musicians until he found exactly the combination that would work for him. It was, you know, pure selfishness on Richie's part, but he knew exactly what he wanted to hear, and he went after it, and he got it, and that was it. Well, every lineup had its own merits, and every lineup was great in my opinion. I have no favourites. There's no bad ones really. There just weren't any bad ones. Richie thought there were some bad lineups, and he did everything he had to do to fix that problem. But I can't remember every lineup, so it would be very hard to make comments on that. There were so many of them. We were thinking at one time of starting a home for ex-Rainbow members, you know, the old Rainbow members' old folks home. So it would be full of all these past Rainbow musicians sitting around the pool in rocking chairs. And I think it's come to pass, actually. It went as far as Richie wanted it to go. He could have made it bigger, but he chose to not go to some places in the world that could have, you know, led to bigger success. He got kind of too picky on what he would and wouldn't do, and where he would go and where he wouldn't go. And it got as big as he wanted it to be. He controlled it in that way, and he was perfectly happy with where he was at the time. So they had quite a high level of success worldwide, but like I say, there were places that he refused to go to for whatever reasons, and he could have made it bigger, but he just chose to keep a lid on certain things and just cruise along at a certain pace, and he was happy with it. And that was it for him. It was the best times of my life, I think. Living in California in the early 70s, it was just a magical time. It was a lovely place to live then. I wouldn't say it is now, but we just had some great times, some fun times. Unlike the business today, it was a lot of fun. But I'd like to go back and visit maybe one day some of the old haunts, the Rainbow Bar and Grill, where I spent most of my life and money. The worst memories towards the end of all the fighting, and you know, the watching the lineups disintegrate, and best memories, again, the early days, the formative days of Rainbow, when they were finding the right musicians, finding the right lineups, and living in California. It was a very, very magical time. I've never regretted that move in my life. Yes, Bruce and I had a much closer relationship then than we do now, for obvious reasons. But he used to share a lot of his thoughts at the time, which he doesn't now. He never did for the last however many years. He plays his cards very close to his chest and won't let anybody get close to his thoughts, and it was very counterproductive. But back then, he talked openly about what was going on, what possibly would happen, how things were shaping up. So I knew what was going on, yeah. I knew all about the possibilities of this happening and Richie's feelings on it and so on. I wasn't at that particular dinner, but I was at another one where there was a big clashing of the heads between him and Richie in Vermont, where, you know, they both ended up walking out of this meeting that was but I wasn't at the particular dinner where Ian did whatever he was supposed to have done. I wasn't privy to what happened actually, so I don't know. Well, it was then again, it was a really exciting sort of prospect of all these guys coming back together and going at it again. And we moved around to a lot of different studios looking for the ideal location to do this. And we settled in Vermont on this. We rented a huge house and did the album in the basement of this house, and the band lived in the house, and some of us lived in a little cottage on the property. And again, it was a great time. They wrote the album there, they recorded it there. We spent a lot of time in the winter there, you know, and we went back and did another album there at a different location. It was a great time. Lots of soccer, lots of drinking down at the English pub. Hello, Richard, if you're out there. It was good times. Again, I thought, here we go, it's starting all over again. But it became very much a business very quickly, whereas the old days were lots of fun. Well, for the Royal Albert Hall shows, it was probably the most challenging thing that me and the crew have ever sort of put together at short notice. It was a great success, but it was a nail-biting experience from the start to the finish. And then we took it on the road and did it in Europe, South America and Japan. And it was different, very different. It was hard work for the musicians, as we had so many orchestras involved. And my nephew, the conductor, had his work cut out for him for sure, working with people who couldn't speak English. And it just all came together so remarkably well in the end. It was again something I really enjoyed doing, a great challenge, and it was excellent. I've just heard that John Lord has probably left the band, or has probably left the band, as they've just cancelled their British tour, which would be quite sad. The end of an era, you know, again. Future, it's up to the public what they're going to accept, whether or not they'll accept another lineup change. I'm sure they will, to have a certain level of success again, but I've heard the replacement for John will be Don Airy, and that's quite common knowledge, so I'm not spilling any secrets here. But who knows? I mean, they could be huge again. It's up to the public to decide now. I wish them all the luck in the world. I do miss it in a way, but you know, I'm out of it. So I'm actually enjoying my life again for the first time in a long time. So it wasn't fun at the end.